The little brass bell over the pharmacy door made a sound I had heard at least 400 times in the past 9 years. A tinny, slightly cracked chime, the kind that doesn't quite ring so much as cough politely at you. I stepped inside and the cold air conditioning hit my face the way it always did. That mix of mint and antiseptic and the faint waxy smell of the candles they sold near the register for some reason. I knew this place better than I knew my own kitchen those days. The shelves with the heating pads on the left, the reading glasses spinner that I'd walked into with my hip more times than I cared to admit, the little wooden bench near the blood pressure machine where I'd sat with my husband during his last good winter, before everything got harder. It was a Tuesday in late September and I had come in to pick up my refills the way I did every 2 weeks. The young woman at the front register waved at me without looking up from her phone. I waved back the same way. We had an arrangement, she and I. Neither of us required pleasantries. I made my way past the vitamin aisle to the back counter, where Sophia was already pulling the white paper bag with my name stapled to it. Sophia Delgado had been the pharmacist at this little independent shop on the corner of Wexler and 9th for as long as I had been coming here. She was somewhere in her late 40s, I thought, with thick black hair that she always wore in a low bun and a way of looking at you over her reading glasses that made you feel like she was actually seeing you. Not the way a cashier sees you, the way a person sees a person. She'd known my husband. She had been the one who walked me through the morphine dosing schedule near the end, slowly, patiently, 3 times, because I kept forgetting what she'd just said. She had been the one who, on the morning after he died, slid a small cup of coffee across the counter to me without asking and said, "Sit down for a minute, sweetheart." I trusted her. That mattered. That matters now more than I realized at the time. "How's the back?" she asked. "Still mine," I said, which was our joke. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes the way it usually did. I noticed it but didn't think much of it. "Everyone has Tuesdays." "Listen," she said. Her voice was low. She had a way of leaning forward over the counter that made the conversation feel like a secret even when she was just telling me about a coupon. "Can you come around to the side? I want to show you something about your blood pressure cuff. The reading you took last week." I blinked at her. I hadn't asked her about my blood pressure cuff. I hadn't even mentioned it. But I went around to the side, the little half door that led to the consultation area. The one with the curtain you could pull for privacy. I went because she asked, and I went because there was something underneath her voice that I had heard once before in my life, when a labor and delivery nurse 41 years ago had asked me very quietly if I could roll onto my left side, please, right now. I sat down on the little stool. She pulled the curtain. She set my white paper bag on the counter between us. Then she reached behind her and pulled out a second white paper bag. It looked just like mine. It had my name on it, too. "Take your hands and put them in your lap," she said softly, "and just listen to me for 1 minute. Don't say anything yet. Don't pick up the bags. Just listen." My ears started to do that thing where they get warm and high-pitched at the same time. I put my hands in my lap. "Your daughter came in here 3 weeks ago," Sophia said. "She told me there had been a change in your prescription. She said your cardiologist had called it in, and she had a printout. The printout looked correct. I confirmed it with the number on the sheet. The number on the sheet went to a voicemail that said it was your cardiologist's office. A woman called back within the hour. She confirmed the change. I filled it. I have been filling it for 3 weeks." I opened my mouth. She held up one finger. Just one. A small, kind gesture. "This morning," she said, "I called your cardiologist's office, the real number, the one I have had on file since 2014. I told them I was confirming the change. They had no record of it. They asked me to fax over what I had. I did. The doctor called me back personally 15 minutes ago. She said she did not authorize any change to your prescription. She said the dose I have been giving you for the past 3 weeks is more than double what she would ever prescribe for a woman your size, and that combined with the other medication, with what you're on for the thyroid, it would over time cause confusion. Memory issues." difficulty with words, a general slowing down. Things that, in someone your age, would look exactly like the beginning of dementia. I am going to tell you something honest. I am going to tell you that in that moment, I did not feel afraid. I did not feel angry. I felt embarrassed. That was the first thing. I felt embarrassed because I had been forgetting things. I had been losing words. I had stood in my own pantry the previous Thursday and not been able to remember the word for cinnamon. I had laughed about it. I had told my daughter about it on the phone. She had said, "Oh, Mom." I had told my daughter about it on the phone. Sophia was watching me. She was watching me the way you watch someone you have just handed a very heavy box to, and you're trying to see if their knees buckle. "The bag on the left is what I filled," she said gently. "The bag on the right is what your cardiologist actually prescribed. The correct dose. I want you to start taking the correct one tonight. Today. Right now if you want to take one in the car. But I need you to understand something else, because I would not be doing my job if I didn't say this to you." I waited. 3 days ago," she said, "your daughter called and asked when your next refill was. She asked if it could be expedited. She asked if I could fill an extra month's worth for travel. She said you were going on a trip. I was not going on a trip. And then yesterday," Sophia said, "a man came in. He didn't give a name. He asked at the front whether we had a customer matching your description. He said he was from a moving company and he needed to confirm an address. The girl at the register thought it was strange and came and got me. By the time I went up front, he was gone. I sat there on the stool with my hands in my lap, and I felt the very strange sensation of two things happening to me at the same time. One was that the floor of my entire life was tilting sideways. The other was that I was, for the first time in maybe a year, completely, perfectly clear-headed. Not foggy, not hesitating, not reaching for words. Sharp, like I had been at 30. "How long have I been taking the wrong dose?" I asked. My voice was steady. I was surprised by that too. 3 weeks tomorrow," Sophia said. "And what happens if I just stop? You'll feel better in about a week. The fog will lift. And what happens if I keep taking it?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at me. She looked at me for a long moment. And then she said, "Eventually, ma'am, in someone like you, it would look like a stroke." "It would not be a stroke. It would look like one. I want to back up here, because if I tell you the rest of it without telling you who my daughter is, none of it will make sense. My daughter is the only child I have. Her father and I tried for years. We had 2 losses before her and 1 after, and then we stopped trying because my body had had enough and so had my heart. She was, from the day she came home from the hospital, the entire center of my life. She is 43 years old. She is smart. She is beautiful. She has my mother's hands. She works in real estate. She has done well at it. She bought a house 7 years ago in a neighborhood I will not name, and she did it mostly on her own. And I was proud of her in a way that I still don't have the right words for. Her husband, a man I will call my son-in-law because I do not want to give him the dignity of being named in my own story, is a man I have known for 11 years. He came into our lives the year my husband got sick. He was charming in the way that some men are charming, which is to say that he learned what you wanted to hear and he said it back to you. He sat with my husband in the hospital. He held my husband's hand. At the funeral, he stood next to me at the receiving line for 3 hours and did not sit down once. People told me afterward what a good son-in-law I had. I believed them. I believed them. I believed him. I will tell you when I should have stopped believing him. About 4 months before that Tuesday in September, my son-in-law started coming over to my house on Saturday mornings. He said he wanted to help me with some things. The gutters. A loose railing on the back porch. A leak under the bathroom sink that I had been ignoring. I let him. I made him coffee. I was grateful. One Saturday in late June, sitting at my kitchen table, he said to me very gently that he and my daughter had been talking. They were worried about me. He was using a soft voice, the voice you use with a frightened dog. They were worried about how much was on my plate. The house was big. The yard was big. I'd had that fall in March, the one where I tripped on the rug in the hallway and bruised my hip. I had been forgetting things, hadn't I? Little things. He'd noticed. My daughter had noticed. They wanted to help. They wanted to take some of the burden off me. They had been talking to a lawyer. He said the word lawyer like it was the name of a friendly neighbor. He explained, in that same gentle voice, about something called a transfer on death deed. He explained about powers of attorney. He explained about how if I were ever to have a stroke or a fall or just a bad day, it would be so much easier on everyone if my daughter could simply step in and handle things. The bank accounts, the house, the investments my husband had left me, which were not large but were not nothing. He said it would be simpler, cleaner, a gift to my daughter, a way of saving her from a lot of paperwork later. He said I could still live in my house, of course. Of course I could. I said I would think about it. He came back the next Saturday. He came back the next Saturday after that. By August, there was a folder on my kitchen table. By September, there was an appointment with a lawyer. A lawyer he had chosen. A lawyer I had never heard of, in a strip mall office I had never been to. The appointment was for that Friday. The Friday 3 days after I sat on Sofia Delgado's stool with my hands in my lap. I am telling you all of this so that you understand what was in my mind when she said the word stroke. He had said the word stroke too. In June, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, holding my hand. I drove home from the pharmacy that Tuesday with both white paper bags in my purse. I drove the speed limit. I stopped at every stop sign. I did not cry. I sat in my driveway for a long time before I went inside because I was making a decision, and once I went inside, the decision would be made. The decision was this. I was not going to confront him. I was not going to confront her. I was not going to call them. I was not going to scream at them. I was not going to give them one single second of warning that I knew. What I was going to do instead was find out exactly how big the room was. I want to explain what I mean by that. When you have been married for 46 years to a quiet, careful man who built radios as a hobby, you learn certain things about how problems work. My husband used to say that when something in a circuit isn't working, you don't start by yanking out wires. You start by figuring out how big the problem is. Is it one component? Is it the whole board? Is it the power source? You map the room before you start opening cabinets. I needed to know how big the room was. That night, I took the correct pill. The real one. The one Sophia had handed me in the second white bag. I took it with a glass of water at my kitchen table. I sat there afterward for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum, looking at the place on the counter where my husband used to keep his crossword puzzles. The next morning, Wednesday, I called my daughter. I made my voice a little vague. I made it a little tired. I told her I was feeling foggy again. I told her I had forgotten what day it was when I woke up. I told her I had stood in front of the toaster for what felt like 5 minutes, trying to remember how to use it. I asked her in a small, frightened voice if she would come over for dinner on Thursday. I said I wanted to talk about Friday. She said, of course. Of course, Mom. She would bring her husband. They would talk it all through with me. I said that would be lovely. After I hung up, I called a man named Louis Petrov. Louis Petrov had been my husband's lawyer for 31 years. He had retired 3 years ago, but he still answered his phone when I called, because that is the kind of man Louis Petrov is. I told him everything. I told him about Sophia. I told him about the pills. I told him about the man who had come to the pharmacy asking about me. I told him about the appointment on Friday. I told him about the lawyer in the strip mall, and Louis took the name down and was quiet for a minute, and then he said in the same voice my husband used to use when something in his circuit board had just become very clear to him, "Honey, you stay right where you are. I'm going to make some calls." He called me back at 2 o'clock. The lawyer in the strip mall was, on paper, a real lawyer. He had a real license, although it was at the very edge of being suspended for unrelated reasons that Louis declined to specify. He had also been the closing attorney on 3 different transactions in the past year in which an elderly homeowner had quietly transferred their property to a family member, and in 2 of those 3 cases, the home had been sold within 90 days. The homeowner had not, in either case, still been living in the home at the time of the sale. Lewis did not say what had happened to those 2 homeowners. He didn't have to. Lewis told me he was going to come over to my house on Thursday morning. He was going to bring a friend with him. The friend was a woman named Detective Halpern, who Lewis had known for 20 years. She had retired from the city and she now did consulting work, and what she consulted on mostly was financial exploitation of elderly persons. Lewis said this in the same flat tone he had used to tell me about the lawyer's license, like he was simply identifying a part of the circuit. Thursday morning they came to my back door. Detective Halpern was a woman in her early 60s with a gray bob and a kind, no-nonsense face. She sat at my kitchen table, and she asked me to start from the beginning, and I did. I told her about every Saturday, every conversation, every soft voice, every time he had used the word stroke, every time he had used the word burden, every time he had used the word burden, every time he had said the words the lawyer thinks. I told her about the folder. I showed her the folder. She asked me, very gently, if I would be willing to wear something during dinner that night, a small recording device. She said it was completely my choice. She said in my state, I had every right to record a conversation in my own home, and the recording would be admissible. She said if I didn't want to, that was also fine, and they would proceed differently. I want to tell you the truth about what I felt in that moment. I felt sad. I felt very, very sad. Because saying yes meant that I had already accepted, somewhere underneath all the thinking, that my daughter was part of this, that she had known, that she had not simply been deceived by her husband, the way I had been deceived by my son-in-law, that she had picked up the phone 3 days before my appointment with the strip mall lawyer and asked if my prescription could be expedited, that my own child had stood in her own kitchen and asked her husband, "How long does it take?" I said yes. The device they used was very small. It clipped inside the lapel of my cardigan. I wore the same cardigan I always wore on cool evenings, the soft beige one with the wooden buttons. They tested it twice in my hallway. Detective Halpern adjusted it once. She squeezed my shoulder lightly and said, "You're going to do fine. Just be exactly the way you would normally be. We're right around the corner." They were, in fact, parked 1 block away in a sedan, listening through earpieces. My daughter and my son-in-law arrived at 6:30. They brought a bottle of wine I did not drink and a casserole dish she had made, which was kind of her. And the moment she walked through the door, my daughter hugged me, and I held her, and I felt her hair against my cheek, and I closed my eyes for 1 second only, because I had been her mother for 43 years and I needed 1 second. Then I let her go and I smiled and I said, come in, sit down. I made a salad. We ate. We talked. I let my words wander on purpose. I forgot the name of an actress on a television show I had just been watching the night before. I asked twice what day the appointment was on Friday. My daughter exchanged a look with her husband. It was a small look, the kind of look you exchange with your spouse over the head of a toddler having a tantrum. I saw the look. After dinner, I asked them to walk me through it again. The deed, the power of attorney, the bank business. I asked in my softest voice if I would still be able to live in the house. My son-in-law leaned forward and put his hand on top of mine and said, "Of course you will, sweetheart, of course. This is just paperwork. Nothing changes." I asked my daughter, "And what if I get worse?" There was a pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. She said, "Mom, we'll take care of you. We'll figure it out. Don't think about that." He said, "We were actually thinking, if it came to that, there's a really beautiful place out on the lake. We've been looking at it. You'd have your own room, your own things." I asked, "When were you looking at it?" He said, "Just recently." She did not say anything. I asked, "Did you put my name on a list?" There was another pause. Longer this time. We just got information, she said, just in case. I asked, honey, just so I understand. If I signed everything on Friday and then I had a stroke, who would decide where I lived? She looked at her hands. He said very gently, we would, sweetheart, together, as a family. I said, I see. I said, I think I'm going to go take my medicine now. It's almost time. I got up and I walked into my own bathroom and I closed the door and I leaned my head against the wall and I breathed in and I breathed out and I thought, I have it. I have all of it. And then I came back out and I sat down and I let them help me with the dishes. They left at 9:15. I stood at the front door and waved until their car was gone around the corner. Then I walked, very calmly, into my kitchen, and I sat down at the table, and I waited. Detective Halpern came in through the back door 3 minutes later. Lewis came in behind her. They sat down with me. Halpern reached across the table and put her hand on mine, the same way my son-in-law had, and I almost couldn't bear the comparison. You did beautifully, she said. I did not cry then either. I had decided sometime around 3 o'clock that afternoon that I was not going to cry until everything was done. Crying could wait. Crying was for after. Friday morning, I did not go to the strip mall. Friday morning, instead, 2 unmarked vehicles pulled up to my son-in-law's office, which was in a building downtown, and 2 officers in plain clothes went upstairs and asked him to come with them. Friday afternoon, my daughter was asked to come to a police station and answer some questions. I did not see her. I did not call her. Lewis had instructed me, very firmly, not to. The investigation took 3 months. There was a forensic accountant. There were records from the pharmacy which Sophia had kept beautifully, every printout, every fax confirmation, every voicemail. The cardiologist gave a sworn statement. The strip mall lawyer surrendered his license rather than face the inquiry. The voicemail number that Sophia had originally called turned out to be a Google number, registered to a burner email, paid for with a prepaid card that had been purchased at a gas station 7 minutes from my daughter's house. My son-in-law was charged with attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, conspiracy to commit fraud, and a third charge involving the controlled substance manipulation, which carried a sentence of its own. He pled out. He is currently serving a sentence I will not describe here because to describe it would be to give him more space in this story than he deserves. He has, I am told, found religion. I have no opinion on that. My daughter was charged as well. She pled to a lesser charge in exchange for cooperating against him. She received probation, a fine she could not afford to pay without selling something, and a court order that requires her to stay away from me for a period that will end next April. I have not spoken to her in 14 months. The hardest day of my life so far was not the day my husband died. The hardest day of my life so far was the day I sat in a chair in a courtroom and watched my only child stand up and say, "Yes, Your Honor," to a question about whether she had known what the medication was doing to me. That is the truth, and I am not going to dress it up. People ask me sometimes how I am doing. Friends from church, the new woman who delivers my groceries, Sophia, who I now have lunch with on the first Wednesday of every month. They ask me carefully, because they know. I tell them I am doing all right. I am living in my own house. I am taking the correct pills. The fog is gone. My cardiologist tells me, in a slightly amazed voice every time I see her, that I am sharper now than I was 5 years ago. And I tell her, yes, well, I had a wake-up call. She doesn't ask what I mean. I think she already knows. I had the framed pharmacy printout, the one with the wrong dose and the forged signature, hung in my hallway for about a week. Lewis told me, very gently, that maybe that wasn't healthy. I took it down. I put it in a drawer. It is still in that drawer. Sometimes I open a drawer and look at it. Then I close the drawer. I will tell you the one thing I am still working on, in case it is useful to anyone listening. I am still working on the fact that I let him into my kitchen every Saturday for 4 months. I made him coffee. I let him put a hand on top of mine. I let him use my husband's voice on me. That gentle voice, the voice of a man who cared about me. and I did not question it once. A friend of mine said to me not long ago, "Don't blame yourself. You couldn't have known." I told her with love that she was wrong. I could have known. I just didn't want to. I wanted, very badly, for my daughter to have married a kind man. I wanted, very badly, to have a son-in-law who held my hand at the funeral because he meant it. I wanted, very badly, to be loved by the family I had left. The hardest thing I have ever had to learn, in 67 years of being alive, is that wanting something to be true is the most dangerous thing a person can do with their own mind. So, I will leave you with this. If a person in your life starts being gentler with you than they ever have been before, and you cannot quite say why, you do not have to be suspicious. You do not have to be paranoid. But you are entirely allowed to be curious. You are allowed to call your old lawyer. You are allowed to call your pharmacist. You are allowed to put both hands in your lap and listen. The bell over Sophia's door still sounds the same when I walk in. She still pulls the bag down with my name on it. There is only ever one bag now. She slides it across the counter and she says, "How's the back?" And I say, "Still mine," and I mean it in a way I never used to. I have had 14 months now to sit with what happened, and I want to tell you the part of it I have thought about the most. It isn't the pills. It isn't the strip mall lawyer. It isn't even the moment Sophia slid the second white bag across the counter. The part I have thought about the most is the 4 months of Saturdays before any of it. Every Saturday morning, I let my son-in-law into my kitchen, and I made him coffee. And I did not ask myself one honest question. I did not ask why a man who had never fixed a gutter in his life suddenly wanted to fix mine. I did not ask why every conversation, week after week, somehow ended up at the same place, which was paperwork. I did not ask because I did not want to know. And the not wanting to know was a choice I was making every single Saturday with my own 2 hands. I have come to believe that most of the harm that gets done to people my age does not happen in one big moment. It happens in 100 small moments where we are tired or lonely or hopeful or just polite. We let the soft voice keep talking. We say yes to one more cup of coffee. We tell ourselves that being suspicious is rude. And by the time the folder is on the kitchen table, we have already given up the most important thing we own, which is not the house and is not the savings. It is the right to ask hard questions of the people we love. So if I have learned anything worth passing on, it is this. Being a kind person and being a careful person are not opposites. You can love your child and still call your lawyer. You can trust your son-in-law and still ask your pharmacist to double-check. The day Sofia Delgado put her finger up and asked me to listen for 1 minute, she was not being cruel to me. She was being kind in the truest way a person can be kind, which is to say, she was telling me the truth when telling me a lie would have been so much easier on her. I think about her courage often. She could have looked the other way. She could have decided it wasn't her business. She didn't. And I think about Louis Petrov, retired 3 years, picking up the phone for an old client's widow because that is the kind of man he chose to be, year after year, every small decision adding up to a character. And I think about Detective Halpern's hand on mine at my kitchen table, and how it was the first hand in months that touched me without wanting anything from me. Good people do not just happen. They are built, one small, honest choice at a time. And so are the other kind. I cannot have my daughter back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That is the cost of what I learned, and I pay it every day. But I am still in my own house. I am still taking the right pill. I am still myself. And every time the little bell over Sophia's door coughs at me when I walk in, I remember that I am here because someone told me the truth. I hope, when it matters, I do the same for someone else.